I'm Lieutenant Colonel Chloe Rains, 39, an Air Force pilot who worked her way from a small-town scholarship cadet to Special Operations Command. For years, I gave everything to the mission and to the mentor who built my career: late nights, missed family, every ounce of loyalty I had. But when that same mentor stood at a podium and called my judgment a lapse to protect his own reputation, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been erased or betrayed by someone you trusted completely? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what really happened, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself after being silenced, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about integrity, loyalty, and the cost of doing what's right. What came next might surprise you. I stood in the parking lot of the Air Force Academy's Visitor Center on a Thursday morning in May, 22 years old, with a scholarship acceptance letter folded in my jacket pocket. My father had driven me there from Colorado Springs in his old Chevy, neither of us saying much. He'd done 2 tours in Vietnam as an Army grunt, came home with a limp and a distrust of officers. When I told him I wanted to fly, he'd looked at me like I'd announced plans to join the circus. But he drove me anyway. The academy rose against the mountains like something out of a dream I hadn't known I was allowed to have. I grew up in a town where the biggest decision most girls made was whether to work at the grocery store or the diner. My high school guidance counselor had suggested nursing school. I'd applied to the academy on a dare from my physics teacher, a retired Air Force captain who saw something in me I hadn't seen in myself. "You sure about this?" my father asked as I opened the car door. "No," I said. "But I'm doing it anyway." He nodded. That was the last conversation we had about my career for 15 years. I made it through the academy on stubbornness and caffeine. While other cadets formed study groups and social circles, I spent my nights in the library, memorizing aerodynamics equations and aircraft specifications. I wasn't trying to be the best. I was trying not to fail. There's a difference, and it shapes you. Pilot training at Vance Air Force Base in Oklahoma came next. The instructors had a way of looking through you, assessing whether you'd crack under pressure or hold steady. I held steady. Not because I was brave, but because going home felt worse than any training exercise they could devise. I flew my first solo in AT-6 Texan 2 on a clear autumn morning. The instructor climbed out of the cockpit, tapped the fuselage twice, and walked away. I sat there for a moment, hands on the controls, understanding for the first time that I'd built something, a skill, a place, a self that hadn't existed before. That's when I met Colonel Evan Harland. He was running the advanced training program, a full-bird colonel with a reputation for turning out the sharpest pilots in the Air Force. Tall, gray at the temples, with the kind of command presence that made junior officers straighten their spines from across the room. He watched my landing approach one afternoon, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Afterward, he pulled me aside. "You fly like you're trying not to get noticed." "Sir." "Competent." "Careful." "By the book." He studied me. "But there's something else there. You've got instinct buried under all that caution." I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. "I'm putting you on the tactical airlift track," he said. "You'll be flying cargo and personnel into places most people don't want to go. It's not glamorous. You won't be dropping bombs or breaking records. But you'll save lives. And you'll be good at it." He was right. I spent the next 2 years flying C-130s into conflict zones and disaster areas. Haiti after the earthquake. Afghanistan. Pakistan. Places where the runway was a dirt strip and the landing coordinates came with the caveat conditions permitting. I learned to read weather patterns like a second language, to calculate fuel margins in my head, to keep my voice steady over the radio when everything was going wrong. Harlan checked in periodically. A message after a difficult mission. A recommendation that landed me at Air Mobility Command's Special Operations Division. He never made a big deal of it, never asked for gratitude. He just opened doors and expected me to walk through them. When I turned 28, I made captain. Harlan sent a bottle of bourbon with a note. "Don't drink it all at once." I didn't drink any of it. I kept it on my desk as a reminder that someone believed I was worth investing in. The call sign came during a mission I don't talk about much. We'd been tasked with extracting a reconnaissance team from hostile territory in Syria. The intelligence was bad. We landed in a hot zone, took fire on approach, and lost hydraulics on one engine. The crew chief was hit in the shoulder. The reconnaissance team was 3 clicks out with enemy combatants closing in. I had 2 choices: abort and leave them, or stay and risk losing the aircraft and everyone on board. I stayed. We got them out. Barely. The landing back at base was more controlled crash than touchdown. The aircraft was totaled. The crew chief survived. So did the reconnaissance team. Harland visited me in the debriefing room at 0300 hours. I was still in my flight suit, still shaking. "That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've seen in 30 years, he said. "I followed protocol. You followed your gut." He sat down across from me. "Protocol would have told you to abort. You read the situation and made a call. That's leadership." 2 weeks later, the call sign showed up on the squadron board: Purple Phoenix. For rising from the ashes. For surviving what should have killed me. I wore it like armor after that. Harland's mentorship became the architecture of my career. He brought me into Task Wing 12, a special operations unit that handled classified logistics and high-risk personnel recovery. The missions were harder, the stakes higher, the recognition non-existent. We operated in the gaps between official military action and plausible deniability. I thrived there. By the time I made Major at 33, I'd flown missions into 14 countries, most of which I couldn't name in writing. I'd built a crew I trusted, people who knew how to move fast and stay quiet. I missed my sister's wedding. I missed my father's retirement party. I missed holidays and birthdays and every normal marker of a life outside the uniform. I told myself it was worth it. That the work mattered. That Harland's faith in me meant I was building towards something important. He got promoted to Brigadier General when I was 36. 1 star, 07, a ticket to the Pentagon and policy meetings, and the kind of power that shapes entire commands. I was happy for him. Proud, even. At the promotion ceremony, he thanked his family, his mentors, his staff. He mentioned Task Wing 12 in passing, called us one of the finest operational units in the Air Force. He didn't mention me by name. I told myself it didn't matter. That recognition wasn't the point. That the work itself was enough. I kept telling myself that for the next 3 years, even as I watched him drift further into the world of politics and public relations, even as the distance between us grew into something I couldn't quite name. I kept believing that loyalty was a currency that held value, that the sacrifices I'd made would eventually mean something. I was wrong. But I didn't know that yet. Not standing in that ceremony hall, watching Harland pin on his star. Not when I flew my next mission 6 days later, or the one after that. I didn't know that the foundation I'd built my career on was already cracking, that the man I'd trusted most was learning to see me as a tool rather than a person. I didn't know that loyalty has an expiration date, especially when it becomes inconvenient. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning in the briefing room at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. Harland had been promoted 8 months earlier, and I'd been running Task Wing 12 operations with minimal oversight. He was busy with meetings in Washington, testifying before committees, shaping Air Force strategy at levels I'd never reach. I was still flying missions, still doing the work. Major Tessa Corin arrived that Tuesday as Harland's new liaison officer. She was 33, sharp-featured, with the kind of polished presence that came from staff college and Pentagon rotations. Her uniform was immaculate. Her handshake was firm. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "General Harland speaks very highly of this unit," she said during our first meeting. "He's asked me to help streamline communication between field operations and command." Translation: she was there to monitor us. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "We're always happy to have support from command." She sat in on mission briefings after that. Took notes. Asked questions that felt less like curiosity and more like documentation. She never flew with us, never suited up, never put herself in the situations she was evaluating. She observed from a distance and reported back. The dynamic shifted. Harland started delegating through Corin instead of calling me directly. Mission approvals took longer. Requests for equipment or personnel went through additional layers of review. Nothing was denied outright, that would have been too obvious. Things just became harder, slower, wrapped in bureaucracy that hadn't existed before. I tried to adapt, filled out the forms, attended the additional briefings, smiled through Corin's suggestions about operational efficiency and strategic messaging. Then the commendations started disappearing. It was subtle at first. A mission report I'd written came back with my name removed from the byline, replaced with Task Wing 12 Command Staff. A recommendation for one of my crew members was delayed indefinitely because it needed additional command review. A briefing I was supposed to give to visiting congressional staffers was reassigned to Corin at the last minute. General Harland thought it would be better to present a unified command perspective, she explained. You understand. I didn't. But I nodded anyway. The real shift came when Harland visited Ramstein for an operational review. He'd been promoted to general less than a year ago, but he carried himself differently now, more aware of cameras, more careful with his words. He toured the base with a small entourage, including Corin and a public affairs officer who filmed everything. He stopped by the hangar where my crew was prepping AC-17 for a mission into Chad. I'd been working on the aircraft with my flight engineer, TSGT Mina Cho, checking cargo tie-downs and weight distribution. We were both in flight suits, both covered in hydraulic fluid and dust. Harland walked over, followed by his entourage and their cameras. Lieutenant Colonel Rains, he said, using my rank instead of my name. How are preparations coming? On schedule, sir. We're wheels up at 1500 hours. He nodded, then turned to the camera. This is one of my team captains. She's been with the unit for several years, doing excellent work in logistics and personnel transport. One of my team captains. Not Chloe. Not Purple Phoenix. Not the pilot who'd pulled off missions he used to brief personally to senior command. Just one of several, interchangeable and unexceptional. I felt Cho stiffen beside me. She knew what I knew, that Harland was rewriting history in real time, that my role was being minimized for reasons I didn't fully understand. The work you all do here is vital to our strategic objectives, Harland continued, speaking to the camera more than to us. It's the backbone of Air Mobility Command's global reach. He shook my hand for the camera. His grip was firm, professional, distant. Then he moved on to the next photo opportunity. Corin lingered. That went well, she said. Good optics. I didn't respond. That night, I sat in my quarters and pulled up the mission records from the past 3 years. Read through after-action reports. Tracked the language changes, the attribution shifts, the slow erasure of my name from operations I'd planned and executed. Captain Rafi Delgado knocked on my door at 2200 hours. He was one of my pilots, 28 years old, sharp and loyal. He'd flown with me since he was a second lieutenant fresh out of training. You see the recording? He asked. I saw it. That's bullshit, ma'am. You planned half those missions he was talking about. Doesn't matter. It should. I looked at him. You learn pretty fast that what should matter and what does matter are different things. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. People are noticing. The crew. The other units. They know what's happening. Then they're smarter than I was. I closed my laptop. Go get some sleep. We fly in 16 hours. He hesitated, then nodded and left. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I went back through my records, my commendations, my performance reviews. Tried to find the moment when I'd become expendable. Tried to understand what I'd done wrong. The answer, I eventually realized, was nothing. I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd just become inconvenient. Harland was building a reputation in Washington, crafting a narrative of his leadership and vision. That narrative worked better without someone like me, someone who'd been there before his promotion, who knew the work from the ground up, who might complicate his story with inconvenient truths about who actually did what. I wasn't being punished. I was being erased. It's different, that feeling. Punishment you can fight against. Erasure just happens around you, quiet and systematic, until you look up one day and realize you're standing in a space where your name used to be. 3 months later, everything fell apart. The mission brief came through at 0600 hours on a Wednesday in March. humanitarian aid delivery to a refugee camp in South Sudan, classified as low risk, standard cargo run. The camp was in a nominally safe zone, protected by UN peacekeepers. We'd done a dozen similar missions without incident. I read the brief twice. Something felt off about the timeline, too compressed, too many variables marked as confirmed, when they should have been listed as pending verification. But the mission was cleared through command, signed off by Corin herself, marked urgent. We loaded the C-17 with medical supplies, water purification equipment, and emergency rations. My crew consisted of Cho on flight engineering, Delgado as co-pilot, and 2 loadmasters I'd worked with for years. We'd flown together so often we operated in a kind of shorthand, anticipating each other's needs and adjustments. Wheels up at 0900 hours. The flight to South Sudan was smooth, clear skies, minimal turbulence, good visibility. I ran through the landing approach checklist with Delgado, reviewing the coordinates and communication protocols. That's when the situation deteriorated. The UN peacekeepers radioed at 1300 hours. Armed militia had been spotted 3 kilometers from the camp, moving in our direction. The zone wasn't secure. They recommended we abort. I contacted command through encrypted channels, laid out the situation, requested guidance. Corin's response came back within minutes. Continue mission. Intelligence reports militia is moving away from camp. Window is closing. Camp needs supplies urgently. I looked at Delgado. He shook his head slightly, a gesture I'd learned to read. He thought we should turn back. Command, this is Purple Phoenix. Requesting confirmation of intelligence source. UN assets on ground are reporting movement toward camp, not away. There was a pause. Then, Phoenix intelligence is confirmed. You are cleared to proceed. Time-sensitive cargo. Protocol said to follow command orders unless immediate safety was compromised. The militia was 3 clicks out. We could land, offload, and be wheels up in under 20 minutes if we moved fast. I made the call. We're going in. Fast approach, minimal ground time. Loadmasters, I want that cargo off the bird in 15 minutes. We dropped altitude. The camp appeared below us, rows of white tents, dirt roads, a single packed earth runway. I could see people gathering near the landing zone, anticipating our arrival. I could also see dust clouds to the north. Vehicles moving fast. Command, Phoenix. We have visual on possible hostile movement. Estimate 5 minutes to camp perimeter. No response. Command, do you copy? Static. I started the landing approach. Delgado called out altitudes. Show monitored engine status. Everything was by the book, smooth and controlled. We touched down at 13:22 hours. The loadmasters dropped the rear ramp before we'd even finished taxiing. Camp workers ran toward us, ready to start unloading. I kept the engines running, watching the northern perimeter through the cockpit window. The dust clouds were closer now. I could make out the shapes of pickup trucks mounted with weapons technicals in military parlance. At least 3 vehicles, maybe more. Load faster, I said over the internal comm, we've got company. Cho was already running calculations. We need another 8 minutes to fully offload. I watched the trucks. Ran the numbers in my head, their speed, our distance, the time it would take to button up and lift off. We didn't have 8 minutes. Seal it up, I said. We're leaving. Ma'am, we've only offloaded half now, Sergeant. That's an order. The loadmasters pulled back the ramp. I heard supplies sliding, people shouting, the hydraulic system engaging. Delgado was already advancing the throttles. The trucks were less than a kilometer out. I could see muzzle flashes. We lifted off at 13:31 hours with half our cargo still on board and rounds impacting the runway behind us. One of the loadmasters took a fragment in the leg from a ricochet that came through the open ramp. Not life-threatening, but enough to require medical attention. I climbed hard and fast, putting distance between us and the camp, listening to my crew's controlled breathing and the sound of my own heartbeat. We made it back to base at 1500 hours. The wounded loadmaster was treated and stable. The aircraft had minor damage. Everyone was alive. I filed my after-action report immediately. Detailed the timeline, the intelligence discrepancy, the decision to abort. Followed every protocol for mission deviation. Then I waited. The call came at 2100 hours. Not from Harland. From Corin. The general wants to see you tomorrow at 0800 hours. Pentagon briefing room. Understood. She paused. For what it's worth, you should have trusted command intelligence. I hung up. That night, I copied every file related to the mission onto an encrypted drive. The brief. The communications. The intelligence report. My after-action analysis. I didn't know why yet. Just instinct. The same instinct that had kept me alive in Syria, the same one Harland had once told me to trust. It was the smartest thing I'd done in years. The Pentagon briefing room was smaller than I expected, windowless and sterile, with a conference table that seated 12 and walls covered in classified briefing materials. General Harland sat at the head of the table, flanked by Corin and two senior officers I didn't recognize. A public affairs officer stood in the corner with a camera, inactive but present. I stood at attention, waiting. Harland didn't look at me directly. He opened a folder, scanned the contents, then set it aside. Lieutenant Colonel Rains. Walk me through the South Sudan mission. I did. Start to finish. No editorializing, just facts. The intelligence, the UN warning, the command order to proceed, the visual confirmation of hostile movement, the decision to abort. When I finished, he closed the folder. You deviated from direct orders. I made a tactical decision based on evolving ground conditions that posed immediate danger to my crew and aircraft, sir. The intelligence was clear. The militia was moving away from the camp. With respect, sir, the intelligence was wrong. I had visual confirmation of hostile forces approaching the landing zone. Corin leaned forward. What you had was contradictory information from UN peacekeepers who may not have had complete battlefield awareness. Command had access to broader intelligence sources. I kept my eyes on Harland. Sir, I was the pilot in command. The safety of my crew and the mission were my responsibility. I stand by the decision. He finally looked at me then. His expression was carefully neutral, the kind of face you practice for congressional testimony. Your decision left critical humanitarian supplies on board. Supplies that camp desperately needed. Supplies that are now delayed by at least a week because of security deterioration in the region. Sir, if I'd stayed on the ground, we would have been overrun. The crew would have been killed or captured. The aircraft would have been destroyed. No one would have gotten those supplies. That's speculation. That's tactical assessment based on observed conditions. The room went quiet. I could hear the ventilation system, the soft rustle of paper. One of the senior officers spoke up. Colonel, what were your fuel margins at decision time? An opening. A technical question I could answer without politics. We had sufficient fuel to complete the full unload and still make it back to base with reserves, sir. Fuel wasn't the factor. The factor was hostile forces within small arms range of an unsecured landing zone with my ramp down and my crew exposed. He nodded slowly. Made a note. Harland straightened his papers. We'll be conducting a full review of this incident. In the meantime, you're being transferred stateside pending the outcome. Administrative posting, Andrews Air Force Base. Your crew will be reassigned to other units within Task Wing 12. The words hit like physical blows. Transfer. Reassigned. The careful language of career death. Sir, that's all, Lieutenant Colonel. Dismissed. I stood there for 3 seconds too long. Long enough to see Corin's satisfied expression. Long enough to understand that this had been decided before I walked into the room. The briefing was theater. I saluted. Turned. Walked out. The Pentagon corridor stretched endlessly, polished floors reflecting fluorescent lights. My boots echoed. I made it to the bathroom before my hands started shaking. I stood at the sink, gripping the cold porcelain, staring at my reflection. 39 years old. Lieutenant Colonel. Purple Phoenix. One of the finest operational pilots in Air Mobility Command. Being erased. The public statement came 3 days later. I saw it on the evening news in my temporary quarters at Andrews. A Pentagon press briefing. Harland standing at the podium, looking grave and authoritative. An incident involving a humanitarian aid mission that did not go as planned. Due to an unnamed field officer's lapse in judgment, critical supplies failed to reach civilians in need. We're conducting a thorough review to ensure this doesn't happen again. The Air Force holds itself to the highest standards of mission execution. An unnamed field officer's lapse in judgment. He didn't say my name. Didn't have to. Everyone who mattered would know exactly who he meant. I watched the entire briefing. Watched him field questions about accountability and mission planning and the importance of following intelligence protocols. Watched him present himself as the responsible commander addressing a subordinate's mistake. The man who'd once called me the backbone of Task Wing 12, who'd sent bourbon and encouragement, who'd opened doors and built my career, that man described me as a judgment lapse on national television. I turned off the TV. Sat in the dark. The betrayal wasn't the transfer or the public blame. It was the realization that I'd never actually mattered to him. Not as a person. I'd been useful. Competent. A tool that worked well until it became inconvenient. Loyalty, I'd learned, was supposed to run both ways. I'd spent 17 years believing that. Believing that if I worked hard enough, flew the dangerous missions, sacrificed enough, the people above me would honor that dedication. I'd been wrong. The call came from Cho at 2300 hours. Ma'am, I just wanted you to know the crew knows what happened. Delgado's putting together a statement supporting your decision. Tell him not to. But tell him it'll hurt his career and help nothing. This is done, Sergeant. Silence. Then, this isn't right. No, it's not. I hung up. For the first time in 17 years, I cried. Not because of the transfer or the lost career prospects. Because I finally understood that the thing I'd built my entire adult life around, service, loyalty, dedication to something larger than myself, had been a transaction I hadn't known I was making. I'd given everything. In return, I got a desk at Andrews and an unnamed mention on the news. The callsign Purple Phoenix felt like a weight now, something I couldn't wear without remembering how it had been earned and how easily it had been taken away. I thought about quitting. Filing retirement papers. Walking away from all of it. But then I thought about my crew. About Cho and Delgado and the Loadmasters and all the other people who'd depended on me over the years. About the missions that had mattered, the lives that had been saved, the work that was real even if the recognition wasn't. And I thought about Harland, standing at that podium, rewriting history. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could control what came next. I opened my laptop and started going through files. Mission reports. Communications logs. Intelligence assessments. Every piece of documentation I'd been keeping for years, not out of paranoia, but out of habit. The habit of someone who believed records mattered, that truth was worth preserving even when no one was looking. I didn't know yet what I'd do with it all. But I wasn't going to let him erase what actually happened. Not completely. Some things you have to rise from. This was one of them. Andrews Air Force Base sits just outside Washington, D.C., close enough to the Pentagon that you can see the building from certain points on base, a constant reminder of where power actually lives. My new assignment was with the Strategic Operations Analysis Unit, which sounds impressive until you realize it's where they send officers who are technically qualified but politically inconvenient. We wrote reports that other people would use to make decisions. We attended meetings where our input was requested but rarely followed. We existed in the space between relevance and retirement. My office was a windowless cube on the third floor of a building that smelled like floor wax and old coffee. I had a computer, a desk, a filing cabinet, and a view of the hallway. After 17 years of flight decks and operational command, it felt like being buried alive. The first week, I tried to adapt. Showed up at 0700 hours. Read through policy documents and strategic assessments. Attended briefings where senior officers discussed force structure and budget allocations. Smiled politely. Took notes. The second week, I stopped smiling. My new supervisor, Colonel Reese Tanaka, called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. He was 45, Army originally, transferred to Air Force Joint Operations after a career in intelligence and strategic planning. He had a reputation for being smart and difficult to impress. "You're Lieutenant Colrains," he said, gesturing to a chair. Yes, sir. The Purple Phoenix. I tensed. That call sign followed me now, but not in the way it used to. People knew the story, or thought they did. The pilot who'd lost her nerve, made a bad call, got reassigned. I read your file, Tanaka continued. The real one, not the sanitized version they're circulating. 17 years operational, multiple commendations, 0 accidents until South Sudan. And South Sudan wasn't an accident, it was a judgment call that probably saved your crew. I didn't respond. Wasn't sure where this was going. He leaned back. You're here because you pissed off someone with more stars than you. That about right? That's one way to put it, sir. The other way? I followed my training and it became politically inconvenient. He nodded. That happens. More than it should. He opened a folder on his desk. I'm not going to waste your time pretending this is a great posting. It's not. You're overqualified and underutilized. But you're smart, you know operations from the ground up, and you can write clearly. Those are rare qualities in this building. Thank you, sir. I'm not done. He slid a document across the desk. We're conducting a comprehensive assessment of air mobility command logistics protocols, particularly related to high-risk humanitarian operations. I need someone who's actually flown those missions to review the data and provide analysis. Real analysis, not the kind that tells leadership what they want to hear. I looked at the document. It was exactly the kind of mission I'd been running before South Sudan. The kind where bad intelligence gets people killed. When do you need it? 3 weeks. I took the folder. I'll have it in 2. He almost smiled. Dismissed. I worked on that assessment for 12 hours a day. Pulled mission reports from the past 5 years. Tracked intelligence failures and communication breakdowns. Analyzed decision-making protocols and command structure. Built a statistical model showing the correlation between compressed mission timelines and adverse outcomes. The conclusion was clear. Missions like South Sudan failed not because of pilot error, but because of systemic problems in how intelligence was gathered, verified, and communicated to field commanders. The protocols were designed for conventional military operations, not the hybrid humanitarian security missions we were increasingly running. I documented everything. Cited sources. Built an argument that was bulletproof. When I submitted the report, Tanaka read it in one sitting. Then he called me back to his office. This is excellent work. Thank you, sir. It's also going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. Yes, sir. I expect it will. He studied me. You know this won't exonerate you. The narrative around South Sudan is already set. This report won't change that. I'm not trying to change it. I'm trying to make sure the next pilot in that situation has better information. He nodded slowly. I'm forwarding this to the Oversight Committee. They're doing a broader review of operational protocols. Your analysis will be part of it. Understood. One more thing. They might want you to testify. The word hung in the air. Testify. As in, go on record. Put my name and credibility on the line. Make myself even more of a target. If they ask, I'll testify. Tanaka closed the folder. You're either very brave or very stubborn. Mostly stubborn, sir. Good. We can work with that. The Oversight Committee hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, word leaked that I'd submitted a critical assessment of AMC protocols. The reaction was immediate. Corin called my office directly. Lieutenant Colonel Rains. Major Corin. I heard you've been busy. Writing reports. That's my job now. You should be careful. Questioning command decisions can be misinterpreted as insubordination. I kept my voice level. I'm not questioning command decisions. I'm analyzing operational protocols. If someone interprets that as insubordination, that says more about them than it does about me. The general has been very generous with you. The general hung me out to dry on national television. Let's not pretend otherwise. Silence. Then, you're making a mistake. Probably. I've made them before. She hung up. That night, I got a call from Delgado. He'd been reassigned to a different unit, flying transport missions out of Ramstein still. He sounded tired. Ma'am, I heard you're testifying. Who told you that? Everyone knows. It's all over the command grapevine. I closed my eyes. Rafi, you need to stay out of this. Don't attach your name to anything I'm doing. With respect, ma'am, screw that. You saved our lives. The crew knows it. We're writing our own statements. Don't, already done. Cho submitted hers yesterday. The Loadmasters are finishing theirs tonight. We're going on record. You'll tank your careers. Maybe, but at least we'll be able to look at ourselves in the mirror. My throat tightened. You're a good officer, Rafi. I learned from the best. After he hung up, I sat in my quarters staring at nothing. These people, my crew, who'd flown into hell with me, who'd trusted my judgment, were putting their careers on the line because they believed in something bigger than their own advancement. I'd thought loyalty was dead. But maybe I'd just been looking in the wrong places. The Oversight Committee hearing took place in a secure conference room in the Pentagon on a Monday morning in June. The committee consisted of 5 senior officers, 2 Army, 2 Air Force, 1 Navy, all O7 or higher, all with decades of experience evaluating command decisions and operational protocols. I wore my dress blues. Sat at a table facing the panel. A court reporter transcribed everything. The room smelled like stale air and nerves. The committee chairman, an Army 2-star named General Patricia Vance, opened the session. Lieutenant Colonel Rains, you're here voluntarily to provide testimony regarding Air Mobility Command operational protocols and the incident in South Sudan on March 14th. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. We've reviewed your written report. It's thorough and well documented. Today, we'd like you to walk us through your decision-making process during the South Sudan mission and then discuss your broader concerns about current protocols. I'd prepared for this. Rehearsed it. But sitting there, facing 5 generals, I felt the weight of what I was about to do. This wasn't just analysis. This was calling out my chain of command in front of the people who could end my career permanently. Or I could protect the next pilot who ended up in my situation. Not really a choice at all. I started with the timeline, the mission brief, the intelligence assessment, the UN warning, the command order to proceed, my visual confirmation of hostile forces, the decision to abort. Then I showed them the communications logs. At 1300 hours, I requested confirmation of intelligence sources. Command responded that intelligence was confirmed. At 1318 hours, I again radioed about hostile movement. No response. At 1324 hours, with hostile forces less than 1 kilometer from the landing zone, I made the tactical decision to abort the offload and depart. General Vance leaned forward. What happened to the communication at 1318 hours? Unknown, ma'am. It's possible there was a technical issue with the encrypted channel. It's also possible command chose not to respond because they'd already given their order and expected me to follow it regardless of evolving conditions. That's a significant allegation. It's what the communications log shows. One of the Air Force generals, a man named Cordell, spoke up. Colonel Rains, you understand that second-guessing command intelligence in the field sets a dangerous precedent. If every pilot makes their own assessment, we lose operational coherence. With respect, sir, pilots are trained to exercise tactical judgment precisely because conditions change faster than command can assess them. We're not robots. We're officers expected to evaluate situations and make decisions. Even when those decisions contradict direct orders? When immediate safety is at stake, yes, sir. That's what we're trained to do. Cordell made a note. Didn't look happy. The questioning continued for 2 hours. They went through every detail of the mission, every decision point, every communication. They asked about my training, my experience, my relationship with General Harland. That's when things got complicated. You worked directly under General Harland for how many years? Vance asked. 7 years, ma'am. From when I joined Task Wing 12 until his promotion to Brigadier General. How would you characterize that working relationship? Professional. He was an excellent mentor and operational commander. I chose my words carefully. His priorities shifted after his promotion. That's natural. General officers have different responsibilities than field commanders. The committee has copies of the public statement General Harland made following the South Sudan incident. Are you familiar with it? Yes, ma'am. He characterized the mission failure as resulting from an unnamed field officer's lapse in judgment. That field officer was you, correct? Correct. How do you respond to that characterization? This was it. The moment where I could either protect myself or protect the system. Where I could blame Harland personally or address the structural problems that led to South Sudan. I thought about Cho and Delgado. About the next crew that would fly into a situation with bad intelligence and compressed timelines. General Harland was working with the information available to him at the command level. The failure wasn't his personal judgment or mine. The failure was systemic. We have protocols designed for conventional military operations being applied to hybrid humanitarian security missions. We have intelligence being confirmed without adequate verification. We have mission timelines being compressed for political or logistical reasons without accounting for tactical realities on the ground. If we want to prevent future incidents, we need to fix those systems, not just blame individual officers. Vance made a note. Even if fixing those systems means questioning how senior leadership makes decisions? Especially then, ma'am. The room went quiet. Another Air Force general spoke up. Colonel, are you aware that General Harland's office has requested your testimony be stricken from this review? I hadn't known that. But I wasn't surprised. No, sir. I wasn't aware. They're arguing that your testimony is biased due to your personal grievance, with the general following your reassignment. My testimony is based on mission logs, communications records, and 17 years of operational experience. If command wants to argue that's biased, that's their prerogative. But the documents speak for themselves. General Vance closed her folder. Thank you, Colonel Rains. You've been direct and thorough. The committee will review all testimony and documentation before making recommendations. You'll be notified of any follow-up questions. Yes, ma'am. I stood, saluted, walked out. In the hallway, I let myself breathe. I'd done it. Put everything on record. Challenged the narrative. Provided the evidence. Whatever came next, I'd said what needed to be said. The aftermath of the testimony played out slowly, like watching a glacier move. Nothing happened for weeks. I went back to my desk at Andrews, wrote more reports, attended more meetings. The Oversight Committee deliberated behind closed doors. Harland continued his rise through Pentagon politics. Life continued. Then, 6 weeks after my testimony, Colonel Tanaka called me into his office. The committee released their findings, he said, sliding a document across his desk. I read it. The language was careful, bureaucratic, designed to satisfy multiple competing interests. But the core findings were clear. Air Mobility Command protocols for high-risk humanitarian operations required comprehensive revision. Intelligence verification processes needed strengthening. Field commanders would be given greater authority to abort missions based on tactical assessment. Communication systems would be upgraded to prevent the kind of gaps that occurred during South Sudan. And buried in the recommendations, Lieutenant Col Chloe Rains demonstrated sound tactical judgment consistent with her training and experience. Her decision to abort the mission likely prevented casualties and loss of aircraft. It wasn't an exoneration, exactly. But it was vindication. They're not overturning your transfer, Tanaka said. You're still here. But your service record will be amended to reflect the committee's findings. And Harland. General Harland has been informed that his characterization of the incident was inconsistent with the facts. He's been counseled accordingly. Translation: a slap on the wrist. A private conversation. Nothing that would affect his career trajectory. I should have been angry. Part of me was. But mostly I felt tired. There's something else, Tanaka continued. The committee was impressed with your analysis. They've requested you serve as a consultant on the protocol revisions. It would expand your clearance, give you access to broader operational data. Interested? I thought about it. About spending the next few years in this office, in this building, analyzing problems instead of solving them in real time. Yes, sir. I'm interested. Good. You start next month. Word of the committee findings spread through the military grapevine the way everything does, quickly, quietly, with subtle shifts in how people treated me. Officers who'd avoided me after South Sudan started acknowledging me in hallways again. A few sent congratulatory emails. Most just pretended nothing had happened. The most meaningful response came from my old crew. Delgado sent a message. Never doubted you, ma'am. Drinks on me next time you're at Ramstein. Cho sent a photo, her and the rest of the crew standing in front of AC-17, giving a thumbs up. On the fuselage behind them, someone had stenciled Purple Phoenix in small letters near the crew door. Against regs, definitely. But it made me smile anyway. Harlan's response came indirectly. Major Corin was quietly reassigned to a staff position in Alaska. Harlan's public appearances became less frequent. He was still a general, still influential, but the trajectory had shifted. The man who'd been on track for a second star now seemed to be treading water. I didn't take pleasure in it. Revenge wasn't what I'd wanted. I'd wanted the truth on record, the systems fixed, my crew protected. I'd gotten that. Mostly. The hardest part was forgiving him. Not for the betrayal, I understood that. He'd made a political calculation, chosen his career over my reputation. That was a choice I could comprehend even if I couldn't respect it. The hard part was forgiving him for making me doubt myself. For those months when I'd replayed the South Sudan mission over and over, wondering if I'd really made the right call, if I'd been too cautious, if my judgment had actually failed. He'd put that doubt in my head, and it had taken root deeper than I'd realized. I worked through it the only way I knew how, by focusing on the work. The protocol revisions became my mission. I interviewed pilots, analyzed incident reports, consulted with intelligence officers and field commanders. Built a framework that balanced command authority with tactical flexibility, that created better verification systems while still allowing for rapid decision-making. It took 8 months. When we presented the final recommendations to senior leadership, they adopted them with minimal changes. The new protocols went into effect across Air Mobility Command 6 months later. I got a commendation for the work. No ceremony, no public recognition, just a letter in my file and a handshake from Tanaka. You did good work here, he said. Changed the system for the better. Thank you, sir. What's next for you? I'd been thinking about that. I was 40 now. My 05 career was stable but capped. I'd never make 06, never get another operational command. The betrayal had seen to that. But I had a decade left before mandatory retirement, and I'd built something here, expertise, credibility, a different kind of influence. I'd like to stay in analysis, I said. Keep working on operational protocols. Maybe expand into other areas, counterinsurgency logistics, humanitarian coordination, that kind of thing. Tanaka nodded. I can make that happen. We're establishing a new joint task force focused on exactly those issues. I'm recommending you for deputy director. I appreciate that, sir. One condition. You take a mentee. Some young officer who's good but rough around the edges. Pass on what you've learned. I thought about Harlan. About how he'd mentored me, built my career, then discarded me when it became convenient. About the lessons I'd learned from that, both the good and the bad. I can do that. Good. Report to the Joint Operations Center next month. We'll get you set up. Captain Dana Marsh reported to my new office on a Tuesday morning in January. She was 29, an academy graduate with 3 years of operational experience flying C-130s out of Bagram. Smart, confident, with the kind of intensity that reminded me of myself at that age. She'd been flagged for leadership track, but had clashed with her squadron commander over safety protocols during a night mission. The clash had ended with her being right and her commander being reassigned, but she'd earned a reputation as difficult. Captain Marsh, I said when she knocked on my door. Come in. She stood at attention, perfect posture, perfect uniform. Ma'am, reporting as ordered. At ease. Have a seat. She sat, back straight, hands folded. Nervous, but hiding it well. You know why you're here? Colonel Tanaka said you requested a mentee. I assume he thought we'd be a good match, ma'am. Why do you think that? She hesitated. Permission to speak freely? Always. Because I screwed up my career by being right at the wrong time, and you're famous for doing the same thing. I almost laughed. Famous isn't the word I'd use. Respected, then. Among pilots who actually fly missions instead of just talking about them. You've got opinions, Captain. Yes, ma'am. Usually the kind that get me in trouble. Here's the thing about opinions, I said. They're only valuable if you can back them up with evidence and communicate them in a way that actually changes things. Being right isn't enough. You have to be smart about how you use being right. She frowned slightly. With respect, ma'am, it sounds like you're saying I should shut up and play politics. No. I'm saying you should learn when to push and when to document. When to fight in public and when to fight through proper channels. When to be loud and when to be strategic. I pulled out a folder. This is your file. You've got 3 incident reports in 3 years. Each time, you were technically correct. Each time, you went about it in a way that pissed off everyone above you. So I should have just followed bad orders? You should have built a case. Documented everything. Gone through the proper channels. And if that failed, then gone loud. But you skipped all the groundwork and went straight to confrontation. That's not courage. That's just impatience. She looked angry. Good. Anger meant she was listening. I spent 17 years building a reputation, I continued. Working my way up, earning trust, proving myself. When I finally had to take a stand, I had that foundation to stand on. The committee listened to me because I had credibility. You're trying to take stands without building that foundation first. How long is that supposed to take? As long as it takes. We stared at each other. She reminded me so much of myself it was almost painful. That certainty. That impatience. That absolute conviction that being right was enough. I'm going to teach you how to be effective, I said. Not just right. Effective. How to build cases, document evidence, navigate command structures, and actually change things instead of just making noise. Interested? She thought about it. Then nodded. Yes, ma'am. Good. We start tomorrow. 0700 hours. Bring coffee. She left. I sat in my office, thinking about cycles. About how we pass things down, skills, mistakes, hard-won wisdom. About how mentorship could either perpetuate systems or help change them. I thought about Harland. About the things he'd taught me that were valuable: operational excellence, strategic thinking, attention to detail. And about the things he'd taught me by negative example, that loyalty has limits, that politics can corrupt good leadership, that you have to be careful who you trust with your career. I could either become bitter about that betrayal or use it to become a better mentor. To teach Marsh not just how to be a good pilot, but how to navigate a system that didn't always reward excellence. How to protect herself while still maintaining integrity. How to rise without becoming the kind of leader who sacrifices subordinates for advancement. It wasn't revenge. It was something better. It was making sure the next generation learned from my mistakes instead of just repeating them. Over the next year, I worked with Marsh on a project analyzing personnel recovery protocols. She was brilliant, saw patterns I'd missed, asked questions that challenged assumptions. She was also still impatient, still prone to confrontation, still convinced that force of will could overcome bureaucratic inertia. But she learned, slowly, how to build arguments that couldn't be dismissed. How to document everything. How to pick battles worth fighting. How to make allies instead of enemies. 6 months into our work together, she came to my office looking troubled. Ma'am, I heard something. About you and General Harland. What about us? One of the senior captains said you used to be his protege. That he mentored you. That he's why you had such a successful career early on. That's accurate. So what happened? Why did she stopped, not sure how to finish. Why did he throw me under the bus? Yes, ma'am. I leaned back in my chair. Because I became inconvenient. Because protecting me would have hurt his career and sacrificing me cost him nothing. Because loyalty, for him, only ran one direction. That's messed up. It is. But it's also a lesson. People will help you when it benefits them. Your job is to make sure you're valuable enough that the benefits outweigh the costs. And to have enough documentation that if they do decide to sacrifice you, you can protect yourself. She was quiet for a moment. Is that cynical or realistic? Both. Do you still hate him? I thought about it. No. I did for a while. But hate takes too much energy. I forgave him. Not because he deserved it, but because I needed to stop carrying it around. Did you tell him that? No. Forgiveness isn't for him. It's for me. She nodded slowly. I don't know if I could do that. You'd be surprised what you can do when the alternative is letting someone else control your life. The conversation stayed with me for days. Made me realize I'd actually processed the betrayal, turned it into something useful instead of just painful. I wasn't the same person who'd stood in that Pentagon bathroom with shaking hands. I'd changed. Grown. Not despite what happened, but because of it. The call sign Purple Phoenix didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like proof that I'd survived something that should have ended me and come out stronger. 3 years after the South Sudan incident, I flew commercial from Washington to Colorado to visit my father. He was 78 now, still living in the same house I'd grown up in, still stubborn and independent. We'd rebuilt our relationship slowly over the years, though we still didn't talk much about my career. He read about the Oversight Committee findings in the news, sent me a one-line email. "Proud of you, kid." Coming from him, it meant everything. I landed at Denver International at 1500 hours on a Thursday. The airport was crowded, holiday travel season, families with luggage, business people rushing between gates. I dressed civilian, jeans and a jacket, my old dog tag on a chain under my shirt. I didn't usually wear it, but something had made me put it on that morning. The security checkpoint was backed up. I got in line with everyone else, laptop out, shoes off, the familiar ritual of post-9/11 travel. The TSA officer checking IDs was young, maybe 30, with the kind of bored efficiency that comes from seeing thousands of faces every day. "ID and boarding pass, please." I handed them over. He scanned them, glanced at my face, handed them back. "You're good. Next." I walked through the metal detector. It beeped. "Step aside, ma'am." Secondary screening. An older TSA officer, name tag reading Keller, approached with a hand scanner. "Arms out to the side, please." I complied. The scanner beeped when it passed over my chest. "You wearing a necklace?" "Dog tag." "Military." He gestured for me to pull it out. I did. The metal tag dangled from the chain, slightly worn, engraved with my name, service number, blood type. And on the back, Purple Phoenix. Keller looked at it. Smiled slightly. "Cute prop. Lot of people buy these as fashion accessories now." The words stung more than they should have. Like the call sign itself was just merchandising, something civilians wore to look military without understanding what it meant. "It's not a prop," I said quietly. "Sure. We still need to screen it. Standard procedure for metal." He ran the scanner over it again. Frowned. Ran it again. The machine started beeping differently. Not the standard metal detection tone. Something else. An alert. Keller's expression changed. He looked at a screen I couldn't see, then back at the dog tag, then at me. "Don't move," he said, voice suddenly formal. He called over his supervisor, a woman in her 40s who moved with the authority of someone who'd been doing this job for decades. They conferred in low voices, looking at the screen, looking at me. The supervisor picked up a phone. Made a call. Her expression was unreadable. Around me, other travelers started to notice. The line was backing up. People were staring. "Ma'am," the supervisor said, approaching me. "Can you come with us, please?" My heart rate kicked up. This felt wrong. "Is there a problem?" "Just a few additional questions." "This way." They led me to a small room off the main security area. White walls, a table, 2 chairs. The supervisor gestured for me to sit. "Ma'am, your dog tag flagged in our system. The engraving on the back, Purple Phoenix, is registering as a classified access code." I stared at her. "What?" "The system is showing you have override clearance for certain security protocols. Is that correct?" I hadn't known that. Hadn't known that the call sign was registered anywhere beyond Air Force personnel systems. Hadn't realized it carried weight outside military channels. "I'm a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force," I said carefully. "I served in special operations. Purple Phoenix was my operational call sign. Can you verify your identity?" I pulled out my military ID. She studied it, compared it to something on a tablet, made another call. 5 minutes later, she came back. Her demeanor had completely changed. "Lieutenant Colonel Rains, I apologize for the inconvenience. Your clearance level wasn't immediately apparent. You're cleared to proceed. Is there anything we can do to expedite your travel?" I just wanted to leave. to get out of that room and process what had just happened. No, thank you. She escorted me back through security personally, bypassing the regular line. Keller was standing near the checkpoint, looking pale. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said. "I didn't know, it's fine." But it wasn't fine. Or rather, it was better than fine. It was proof. For 3 years, I'd believed that the betrayal had erased me. That Harlan's public statement and my transfer had somehow invalidated everything I'd done. That the callsign Purple Phoenix had become a liability instead of a badge of honor. But the system remembered. Not just military systems, civilian systems, security protocols, the infrastructure that tracks clearances and access and authority. Somewhere in databases I didn't even know existed, Purple Phoenix still meant something. Still carried weight. I walked through the airport in a daze. Got my luggage. Found my rental car. Drove to my father's house in silence. He met me at the door, older and grayer, but still solid. Hugged me the way he never did when I was younger. "You look different," he said. "Different how?" "Lighter. Like you put something down." We sat on his porch with coffee, watching the mountains turn purple in the evening light. I told him about the airport. About the dog tag. About how a random security screening had somehow proven that I hadn't been erased after all. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You know what I learned in Vietnam?" he finally said. "The people who make the most noise about honor usually don't have any. And the people with real honor don't need to announce it. It just shows up when it matters." Is that supposed to make me feel better? I don't know. Does it? I thought about it. About Harlan's press conferences and public statements. About my quiet work on protocol revisions. About the oversight committee findings that most people never read. About a dog tag that carried more authority than I'd realized. "Yeah," I said. "Actually, it does." We sat in comfortable silence as the sun set. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something close to peace. Not because I'd beaten Harlan or gotten revenge or been publicly vindicated. Because I'd survived. Rebuilt. Found purpose in different work and a different kind of leadership. The callsign Purple Phoenix had always been about rising from the ashes. I'd thought that meant the helicopter crash in Syria, the moment I'd earned the call sign originally. But maybe it meant this too. Rising from a different kind of crash, the betrayal that should have ended my career, but instead forced me to become someone different, someone stronger. I'd given 17 years to the Air Force. Sacrificed relationships and normalcy and the easier path. I'd been betrayed by someone I trusted, sidelined, and discredited. But I'd also survived. Adapted. Built something new from the wreckage. That wasn't failure. That was transformation. And the system, imperfect and bureaucratic and sometimes cruel, still recognized that. Still remembered. Still flagged my call sign with override clearance even when I didn't realize it. I wore the dog tag differently after that. Not hidden under my shirt, but visible. Not as a shield or a weapon, but as a simple statement of fact. This is who I am. What I survived, what I built from the breaking. For years, I'd thought loyalty was silence. That supporting the mission meant keeping my head down and following orders. That being a good officer meant sacrificing myself for people who'd never return the favor. I'd learned different. Loyalty is speaking up when silence would be easier. It's protecting your crew even when it costs you. It's building systems that serve people instead of politics. It's mentoring the next generation not to repeat your mistakes. And sometimes, loyalty means surviving. Rising. Starting again from ashes. That's what Purple Phoenix really meant. Not just one moment of survival, but a lifetime of them. Each betrayal, each setback, each moment where I could have given up but chose to keep going. The airport screening was just one more proof of that. One more reminder that I'd earned something that couldn't be taken away, not by politics or public statements or career reassignments. I'd earned the right to rise. Again and again, as many times as it took. That was enough. 1 year later, I stood in front of a lecture hall at the National Defense University in Washington, looking at 40 mid-career officers who'd been selected for advanced strategic studies. Captains and majors, some Air Force, some Army, a few Navy. All of them sharp, ambitious, already marked for command track. I'd been asked to give a guest lecture on operational decision-making in complex environments. The invitation had come through Colonel Tanaka, who'd been promoted to Brigadier General and now ran the joint task force I worked for. He'd handed me the speaking request with a slight smile. "They specifically asked for you," he'd said. The Purple Phoenix. The call sign didn't sting anymore. It had become something else, a teaching tool, a case study, a story with lessons embedded in it. I clicked to the first slide. No title, just a question. What do you do when following orders might get people killed? The room went quiet. I had their attention. 7 years ago, I was a major flying special operations missions. I had a mentor who taught me everything about tactical aviation. He told me the most important skill wasn't flying, it was judgment. Knowing when to push and when to pull back. When to follow the plan and when to tear it up. I clicked to the next slide. A map of South Sudan, the refugee camp marked, the route traced. For years ago, I was a lieutenant colonel facing exactly that choice. Bad intelligence, compressed timeline, command orders that contradicted ground conditions. I aborted a mission. Saved my crew. Lost my operational career. I let that hang for a moment. Today, I'm going to tell you why that was the right decision, why it cost what it cost, and what you should learn from it. I spent the next hour walking them through the South Sudan mission. Every decision point, every piece of information, every moment where I'd had to choose between protocol and judgment. I showed them the communications logs, the after-action reports, the oversight committee findings. Then I showed them the new protocols. The changes that came from my testimony. The lives that had potentially been saved because field commanders now had better intelligence verification and clearer authority to abort missions. "Here's what I want you to understand," I said as I reached the final slides. Being right isn't enough. Being right and surviving requires 3 things: documentation, credibility, and courage. Document everything, not because you're paranoid, but because memory is unreliable and politics is unpredictable. Build credibility before you need it, because nobody listens to people they don't respect. And have the courage to act when it matters, knowing it might cost you. A hand went up. An army captain, maybe 30, with the look of someone who'd already seen combat. "Ma'am, what about loyalty? You had a mentor who'd built your career. Didn't testifying against him violate that loyalty?" The question I'd been waiting for. I didn't testify against him. I testified for the truth and for the system. There's a difference. I paused. Loyalty matters. But loyalty to mission and loyalty to people sometimes conflict. When they do, you have to decide what kind of officer you want to be. The kind who protects individuals at the expense of the mission, or the kind who protects the mission even when it costs them personally. But your career, my operational career ended. My actual career evolved. I'm doing different work now, work that affects more people over a longer timeline. That wasn't the path I chose, but it's not a bad path. Sometimes the thing you think will destroy you actually just redirects you. Another hand. An Air Force major with pilot wings. Do you regret it? I thought about that. Really thought about it. I regret the betrayal. I regret the months of doubt. I regret missing my crew, missing the cockpit, missing the work I was good at. I looked around the room. But I don't regret the decision. Because the alternative was compromising everything I believed about what it means to be an officer. And that would have been worse than any reassignment. The lecture ended. Several officers came up afterward with questions. One, a Navy lieutenant commander, waited until the others had left. "Ma'am, I'm facing something similar. Different circumstances, but the same basic choice: follow orders I think are wrong, or push back and risk my career." "What's the mission?" He told me. A logistics decision that would save money, but compromise safety margins. Nothing dramatic, just the slow erosion of standards in favor of efficiency. "Do you have documentation?" "I'm building it." "Do you have credibility with your command?" "Some. Not as much as I'd like." "Then build more before you push. Make yourself valuable. Prove your judgment on smaller things first. Then, when you do push back, you'll have the foundation to stand on." He nodded slowly. "That's not the advice I expected." "What did you expect?" "Something more heroic. Stand up, speak truth to power, damn the consequences." I smiled. That's the Hollywood version. The real version is be strategic, build your case, pick your moment, and understand that you might still lose. But at least you'll lose on your own terms. He thanked me and left. I packed up my materials, thinking about how strange it was to be here. For years ago, I'd been grounded and bitter, convinced my career was over. Now I was teaching the next generation, shaping how they thought about command and judgment and loyalty. Different work, but important work. Captain Marsh found me in the parking lot. She'd been sitting in on the lecture, part of her professional development. She'd made first lieutenant a year ago, was on track for captain ahead of schedule. That was good, she said. You didn't sugarcoat it. Never do. The part about loyalty. That hit hard. Personal experience? She nodded. My old squadron commander reached out. Wants me to testify in his defense at a review board. Says I owe him for the mentorship. Do you owe him? I don't know. Maybe. But what he's being reviewed for, it's legitimate. He really did compromise safety. If I testify for him, I'm lying. Then don't. But loyalty doesn't mean lying for people. It means telling the truth even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I unlocked my car. You don't owe anyone your integrity. Not me, not Tanaka, not your old commander. That's the one thing that's actually yours. She looked relieved. Like she needed permission to do what she already knew was right. Thanks, ma'am. I drove back to my office thinking about cycles. About how we pass down not just skills but values. About how mentorship could either perpetuate broken systems or help fix them. I thought about Harland, about the good things he'd taught me before the betrayal. About how even failed relationships leave lessons worth keeping. My phone buzzed. A message from Tanaka. Good lecture. Dean wants you back next semester. Interested? I thought about it. About standing in front of rooms full of officers who were where I'd been, smart, ambitious, still believing the system would reward excellence. About giving them tools to navigate that system without becoming casualties of it. Yes, I replied. I'm interested. That night, I met my father for dinner. He'd flown out to visit, wanted to see Washington, wanted to understand this new version of my life. We sat in a restaurant near the Pentagon, eating steaks and talking about nothing important. You seem happy, he said eventually. I am. Mostly. Mostly? I still miss flying sometimes. Miss the crew. Miss the work. But I'm doing something that matters. Just differently than I expected. He nodded. That's life. Rarely goes the way you plan. The question is whether you can adapt. Did you? After Vietnam. Eventually. Took a while. He cut his steak. I was angry for years. Angry at the army, at the politicians, at everyone who'd sent us there, and then forgot about us. But anger doesn't build anything. It just burns. What changed? I stopped asking why it happened and started asking what I could do with what I'd learned. Found ways to help other vets. Turned the experience into something useful instead of just painful. I thought about that. About transformation. About how survival is just the first step and meaning is what you build afterward. That's what I'm doing, I said. Turning it into something useful. I know, he said. I'm proud of you. Coming from him, after all these years, it felt like closure. Not just on the betrayal or the career change, but on something older. The need to prove myself to someone who doubted I belonged in uniform. The need to justify choices he didn't understand. I didn't need that anymore. I'd proven it to the only person who mattered, myself. Later, walking back to my car, I touched the dog tag under my shirt. Purple Phoenix. The call sign that had defined me, broken me, and ultimately taught me what really mattered. Rising wasn't about going back to what you were before. It was about becoming something new from the ashes of who you'd been. I'd risen. And I'd keep rising. As many times as it took. That's my story. Now tell me yours. What would you have done in South Sudan, follow the order, or abort? Have you ever had a mentor turn political on you? How do you balance loyalty to people versus loyalty to the mission? Would you have worn the dog tag after the TSA moment? Drop your take in the comments, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe for the next chapter on boundaries, judgment, and career survival.